When Goliath opened at Six Flags Magic Mountain back in 2000, it was the world's tallest roller coaster, at least for a couple months. Even still though, this coaster stands as one of the tallest and fastest rides at the park. But does that mean Goliath is actually one of the better coasters at Magic Mountain? Because of course height and speed is not everything. Today, we're going to get into Goliath, a coaster that is much maligned among coaster enthusiasts. As I said, this ride opened back on February 11th, 2000, and it was pretty revolutionary for this time. It was the world's tallest coaster. Now, it didn't hold that record for very long, but at least they could market it when it opened. This coaster was built by Giovanola, and a lot of people have questioned that decision considering B&M was probably an option. For reference, Goliath is a hypercoaster. B&M has built 18 hypercoasters. Giovanola built 3 coasters total. I guess they were trying to give this company a second chance, but unfortunately for Giovanola and really for Magic Mountain too, this ride has not worked out as well as it could have. Goliath is located on the right side of the park, and this coaster's entrance is fantastic. The big letters next to the midway spelling the coaster's name is a nice touch, and then the lift hill in the background creates the perfect backdrop. And this is a Goliath that actually lives up to the Goliath name. After all, it stands 235 feet in the air, and it's one of the first things that catches your eye in the Magic Mountain skyline, which in itself is saying something considering how many big rides Magic Mountain has. As of June 2024 when this is being recorded, my one visit to Magic Mountain was March of this year, and it was during the week on the days we went, so the crowds weren't terribly heavy. That said, I've seen this park and this ride have really long queue times. Luckily though, this was one of the coasters in the park that even on a weekday in March was running 2 trains, each train seating 30 riders. Were the operations fast? Well, no, we still had to wait on the brake run a little bit between cycles, which was unfortunate because you should be able to get a train out before the next one hits the brake run. But alas. At the end of the day, this is Six Flags operations we're talking about. You store your stuff on the station platform. And the nice thing about Goliath is the trains. The trains that Giovanola came up with are very comfortable. I would say that it's pretty easy to get airtime room on Goliath, which is true, but when a hypercoaster like this doesn't really offer airtime, I'm not sure how relevant that is. Despite Giovanola only building 3 coasters, their trains are a lot better than a lot of other manufacturers who have built many more. You roll out of the station and ever so slowly take a right-hand turn before ascending your 235-foot tall lift. And I must say, because it's a chain lift, it takes you a while to get to the top, but you do get some good views of Twisted Colossus in particular. Then you go down your first drop, which is 255 feet into a 120-foot tunnel, reaching a speed of 85 miles an hour. This drop is only at about 60 degrees, which for coaster standards isn't very steep, and I think that's the main reason why, even in the very back row, you won't always get airtime. This is unfortunate because coming out of your seat on a drop is the best part of a drop. In the front, I imagine you really hang over there at the beginning, which probably makes the drop a bit more scary for some. So, even in the back, does Goliath's first drop have any airtime? Not necessarily, but it does have good speed, and the tunnel feature at the bottom is a nice touch. From here, you rise up into a big right-hand turn before dropping back down in the direction you just came. This moment isn't uncomfortable or anything. In fact, the whole ride is very smooth, which we'll talk about more later, but this element does feel kind of pointless. It just turns you around with no real bite. And I must say, this is a decent preview of what the rest of the ride is going to be like. Relatively forceless. Except for one moment. We'll get there. Next is an airtime hill that looks to give awesome floater airtime. That gives just okay floater air at best. You might know what I mean when I say that sometimes on a coaster, a drop or a hill feels like it comes close to giving airtime but falls just short. Goliath's hill, right here, is one of those moments. In fact, someone in my family didn't even know there was an airtime hill on Goliath because of how little floater air you get on it, which is really unfortunate because if this was a good floater moment, it would make the rest of the ride and the ride in general so much more fun. From here, you twist to the left and into one of the harsher mid-course brake runs you'll ever experience on a coaster. I've heard this be referred to as a buzzkill moment before, and I definitely understand that because the speed of the first half is completely taken away, and you also get a great view of the fact that Goliath really needs a repaint in some sections. Judging from some older footage, it looks like the mid-course brake run didn't hit as hard when the ride opened. To the average rider, this mid-course brake run might seem unnecessary, but when you realize the element that comes just a few turns later, you'll understand. After a left-hand turn and a right-hand turn, you enter one of the more intense moments at Six Flags Magic Mountain, the double helix. Usually high G-forces don't last for very long. That's not the case here. This moment is said to have 4.5 Gs for 6 seconds. That's a lot for a long period of time. Does it have that much now with the mid-course brake run hitting so hard every time? I don't know about that, but what I do know is that this is a for sure gray out moment on every ride. If you like intensity, this is going to be the highlight of the ride for you. I much prefer negative G's over positive G's, but I still appreciate the force that this element has, especially when you compare it to the rest of the ride, which, to be frank, doesn't have much force. Giovanola didn't really know how to make airtime moments, but they do know how to make helixes. Titan, Goliath's near clone in Texas, has 2 double helixes for intensity. Goliath ends with a left-hand turn and a right-hand turn into the brakes. These have no force once again. I think this is more forgivable considering the helix you just went through a moment ago. And so, that ends your ride on Goliath, which is 4,500 feet long. I feel like I've been relatively negative at points in this review, talking about how this ride doesn't have as much force as some other coasters in the park, and certainly not as much as some other hypercoasters, but let's appreciate what Goliath does well. Besides the trains, this coaster does have decent speed in the first half. 85 miles an hour is 85 miles an hour after all, and you do feel it at a few select points. The main pro with Goliath is its smoothness. This coaster has held up very well over 24 years. This is a good thing because despite the problems us coaster enthusiasts might have with some of the layout and element choices, it's not uncomfortable at any point. The only moment that some might consider uncomfortable is that helix because of the high G-forces. Another coaster YouTuber, Eric from Theme Park Avenue, described Goliath as good, not great, and I think that's the perfect description for this Giovanola hypercoaster. Looking at this ride's stats, you would think that this should be one of the best coasters in its own park and one of the best coasters in the entire state of California, but I don't think that's the case. If this ride had a better layout and was still the same smooth experience with those trains, it could be a really good ride. But I still think it's worth riding when you go to Magic Mountain, so I'm going to give Goliath a final score of 8 out of 10. Goliath is flawed, yes, absolutely, but it's still fun, and it's a record breaker, even if it didn't even last a full calendar year. So there you have my thoughts on Goliath at Six Flags Magic Mountain, the controversial Giovanola hypercoaster at Six Flags Magic Mountain in Valencia, California. If you enjoyed this review, I've done plenty more coaster reviews in the past for Magic Mountain coasters and otherwise, and we'll have plenty more videos coming up shortly. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.